Hi, John here. I'm going to say a few words today on the role of women in church based on a few decontextualized passages drawn from one or two of Paul's epistles. Quote, "Let your women keep silence in the church, for it is not permitted unto them to speak, but they are commanded to be under obedience, as also saith the law. And if they will learn anything, let them ask their husbands at home, for it is a shame for women to speak in the church." 1 Corinthians chapter 14, verses 34 to 35. Quote, "Let the women learn in silence with all subjection, but suffer not a woman to teach, nor to usurp authority over the man, but to be in silence." End of quote. 1 Timothy chapter 2, verses 11 through 12. Seems straightforward, doesn't it? Women are not allowed by God to air an opinion, to be heard from, to exercise any authority in a church service. They may run Fortune 500 companies outside of the church and order hundreds, if not thousands of men around. They may be policewomen and enforce our laws. They may serve in leadership roles in the military and even order men into battle and perhaps death itself. But in church, God, we are told, says, "Shut up and listen to your husband," even if he is dumb as the day is long, or never goes to church, or goes and nods off to sleep. So, how many churches, assemblies, fellowships do you know where women are forced to be silent at all times during church services? Not many, I would venture. I'm not sure what form the official apologetics take to wiggle out from under this teaching of Paul, or is it God? But I know most churches have found a way to ignore this plain scriptural teaching. In the vast majority of churches around the globe, women's voices are heard in services of one kind or another. Personally, I applaud all such efforts. Women, in common with men, are created in the image of God, teaches the Bible. There is no male or female in Christ, teaches Paul. All things are permissible, even though not all things are good for us. But I see no harm in allowing half of the human population to have a say in church. There is no doubt in my mind that I've learned as much from women as men about God and Jesus Christ, in church and out of church. There is no room for doubt that our worship lives would be seriously impoverished if we took these decontextualized passages to silence women in church services. I follow where my conscience and God-given reason leads me. I simply cannot bring myself to believe the God who created our awe-inspiring universe felt some need to keep women silent or away from leadership roles. I have no doubts that legions of men have sought to keep women in their place, and that they have often dressed up their misogynistic thinking in scriptural terms. But those who do so step way beyond the clear intent of what Paul was getting at in these pastoral letters. In context, the problem was not a matter of silencing forever half or more of the human population, not a question of disrespecting the intelligence and maturity of women, but rather a larger general concern with good order and decorum in the worship practice of some of the Corinthian churches. It is hard not to read the whole letter and not reach the conclusion that their worship or meetings had devolved into a kind of free-for-all where everyone was speaking in tongues or prophesying or singing all at once. No one was really listening to what anyone was saying. It was social mayhem where a kind of religious anarchy prevailed, probably from a misunderstanding or exaggeration of the new freedoms the recent converts to the Jesus movement enjoyed. "Enough," said Paul. "Order, discipline, and decorum needed to be reestablished." And I agree. Paul initiated the one-at-a-time rule. One person speaks, the rest listen. Women should wait till they get home if they have questions. No one should speak in tongues unless there was an interpreter. And even here he warns not to overdo it. Keep it to one or two at most. From an administrative point of view, and Paul was both an evangelist and an administrator of a vast empire of house churches, his concerns, probably in response to the concerns of some leaders at Corinth, make sense. As a former administrator, I would have done the same. There needs to be order and respect and one-at-a-time rules in place, and both husbands and wives should wait till alone before discussing some points they disagree with or don't understand, or what they will have for supper that night, or some other domestic concern. Good order in worship, in common with good order in a classroom, are necessary for growth and learning to take place. I think order and respect in worship was the real concern of Paul, and those people who try to silence all women in Christendom for all times are not acting on behalf of God, but rather their own fears and jealousies. Read in context, the issue is not a mandate to silence women, but to establish order in worship practice. Perhaps God is reminding us all that in order to hear His still, quiet voice, we need to practice silence or the use of quiet voices in our worship services. Thank you for listening to me.